Hello, it's Stuart, the Unrepentant Atheist, and we've got a clip from a few years ago. We've got Alonzo calling in, who came on essentially to argue about the supernatural, that it does exist. And he did ask an interesting question in terms of, is it possible to be a skeptic and also claim to be a Christian? And obviously, in Matt's opinion, if you're claiming to be a Christian, you believe in the supernatural, it would be a failure of skepticism. But he did point out there are some Christians who reject the miracles. I can't remember which sect he mentioned, but they reject the miracles, and but they take on board everything else, which Jesus' teachings, that type of thing, and they call themselves skeptics. They've wiped out the miracles and the resurrection. So it is possible in that sense. But okay, so let's move on. He's about to ask Alonzo why he believes in God. So let's find out.
You could be skeptical about religion and be religious. You can question it, but to call you...
Yeah, sorry. This is out of sync. The Atheist Experience upload is out of sync, but I think we can follow it.
Yourself a skeptic Christian?
It's unusual. You could call yourself that.
Sure.
I'd want to know more. Because I'm a skeptic.
Okay.
Because then we'd have to get into, well, why are you being a skeptic about your Christianity?
What do you mean when you say you're a Christian? What do you mean when you say you're a skeptic?
Why are you questioning it to begin with in the first place? And then we can get the ball rolling on.
Well, of course, obviously we hear people calling in all the time. We hear Christians calling in all the time, claiming that they're very skeptical, they question everything, etc., etc. And as Matt has said, it's a failure in skepticism and a failure in critical thinking.
Well, are you really a Christian? Are you solid in your faith?
Yeah, but the problem is that I don't get to define what is or isn't a true Christian.
Right.
And that's why people can call me and say, I'm a Christian and I don't believe in anything supernatural and I don't believe in this and I don't believe in that. But there was this alien guy who came down from another planet and he was Yeshua and that's why he didn't have a father and he, all this other stuff. You can come up with whatever you want and call it Christian.
Right. Okay. Well, one of the things is that I feel like I'm constantly, questioning my faith, trying to see if it holds up against reality. And for me, at the least, I feel like it has, and.
Well, what kind of test have you done that passed? Because that would be interesting.
So, so I've got to, I guess, back up a little bit in terms of my experience. Is that I feel like I've had experiences of God in my life where God has, come to me and directly talked to me. And it's not always what I wanted to hear at the time, and so. So
I'm gonna interrupt because I kind of have to.
Yeah.
Because also we're running short on time. Yeah. But I need clarification on some things. Yeah. You say God's talked to you. Is it an audible voice or a feeling or what?
A vision or, yeah.
So for me, it's just like somebody talking to me,
Like you hear it through your ears or in your head?
In your head.
In my head.
Okay, so it's not like somebody talking to you. So you said it was like somebody talking to you. When people talk to me, I don't just hear it in my head. I hear it through my ears, clearly.
That sounds more like an inner voice kind of grappling with yourself and being skeptical about yourself.
Now the next question is, so you have this experience where you perceive it as someone communicating with you. We won't necessarily have to label it telepathically or whatever, right. But in your head, how do you determine that voice is anything other than you and what your brain does? And then after you've determined that it's something other than you and what your brain does, how did you determine that it's likely to be a god as opposed to some technology you don't understand?
Yeah. So for me, I'm always in my head, if you know what I mean. You're constantly listening to yourself and how you talk to yourself. Does that make sense? And the God voice in my head, as it were, it doesn't talk to me in that same tone, as it were.
Are you saying like the same pitch and the same reasoning that you would normally talk to yourself with?
Basically. Okay. I'm not sure how to describe it. It's like how I know that Jen's voice and Matt's voice are different. They just sound different.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. But the thing is, you have a normal, let's get away. We'll call it a voice.
Yeah.
And we're using that incredibly loosely. So there's a normal voice, tone, thought process, whatever that goes on in the internal dialogue that you tend to have with yourself.
I would prefer to use internal dialogue.
And then there's something that you sense as different in quality about a second internal dialogue that doesn't appear to you to be you talking with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Have you talked to a therapist, a psychologist at all to determine whether or not you're suffering from schizophrenia, from
Other mental
any sort of other mental aberrations that might account for this?
Have, and far as, we've been able to tell, it doesn't seem like it's a schizophrenic type of thing.
Cool. So you've got...
Yeah. I think if this happened to me and I heard a voice which I thought it didn't sound like myself or anything else, anything I'd ever heard of, and it was, it was clear and distinct, and it was, I don't know, a voice telling me even that it was God. Yeah, I mean, obviously I would go to the doctor. I would want to go and see a psychiatrist and be tested. If it continued, if it started giving me information, I don't know. If it started making predictions that were coming true, well, that's another ball game. But he doesn't seem to be saying that. He's not really saying what it is that this voice is saying to him. Of course, I'm not saying that if I was getting predictions, I would necessarily believe it was a god, but it would be a lot more interesting than if it was just a voice saying, "Close down your atheist channel. You're doing harm to the souls of the people in the world." So anyway, let's keep listening.
That's some inner dialogue that's you, and another inner dialogue that you don't feel
that
is
is not
you.
you.
How do you figure out what that other inner dialogue is?
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I didn't quite parse that.
Okay. So in the way that you can tell the difference between Jen's voice and my voice, you can tell the difference between these two inner dialogues, you talking with you versus you talking with what you perceive to be God.
Mm-hmm.
How did you determine that it is in fact something other than you, and rather than just another way that your brain might communicate with itself?
That's the question I was going to get to.
I would have let you.
Yeah. Well, here we go.
I don't want to waste time, and basically from that's a good question. I'm going to have to think about that.
Sure.
Since y'all are running out of time, I'll just say bye. It was great.
Yeah. So there we are. We've got somebody who's a Christian who heard voices in his head, and he's previously spent 15 minutes talking about skepticism and how to determine if supernatural events are real, or how to determine if an event is supernatural. He's pinning his entire faith on these voices in his head, and Matt has just posed quite obvious questions to him, which he could have posed himself. And he's having to hang up because he can't answer the questions. He doesn't know. He doesn't have any evidence. He doesn't have any justification for concluding that the voice he's hearing in his head is actually a god. So we see this so frequently with Christians who are having personal experiences, and when you actually drill it down and ask them, how does that personal experience prove that there's a God? How do you connect the two? How do you map your personal experience to anything that's outside of yourself? And they just can't do it. So it doesn't stop them from believing. I suppose they just have that personal experience, and they just decide to throw their entire faith into it, and just decide that, well, I'm going to believe it, and that's all there is to it. In that case, I would say, why bother calling it the atheist experience? There we are. Let me know what you think of that, and I'll be back again with another video very soon. Bye for now.